Hello Varlets. Today I'm going to be going over a build that is probably one of the most hate-inducing loadouts that most people don't like to see in their games. Used poorly and without thought, all it does is turn a 4-man team into a 3-man team and a lightning-fast liability most of the time. But used well with strategic purpose coupled with a pocket full of tricks and tactics, and this build is a powerful asset to any team. Versatile, extremely mobile, and with the potential to deal devastating amounts of damage, the Phantom Assassin can remove threats from the battlefield before they ever become one. I'm gonna say this now, because of how you need to play this build to make the most of its potential, using it effectively requires a very solid foundation of game sense and a strong grasp of combat mechanics and prowess. This is most evident in Auric level difficulties, where everything you know is put to the test on a moment-by-moment basis. It has a very high skill ceiling because the level of decision making and risks you are taking is outside of the normal playstyles for the majority of classes. In return, the benefits you can bring to a team are like no other. This build is one of, if not the most, mobile of all classes in the game as of patch 15. It has the ability to traverse through the map and enemies undetected with great speed, giving this playstyle many tactical opportunities not available to others. It can be surprisingly durable while in combat, gaining up to a near constant 60% damage reduction while on the offensive. It brings with it a very high octane playstyle that can be very addictive when you pull off maneuvers correctly. While very much an offensive build, it has some supporting qualities to help out allies when tactical opportunities are not open. With that, let's see how the build comes together, starting with the talent selection. Here is the talent tree in its totality. The game's lantern link will be in the description as always. In the meantime, let's go over the talent selection narrative. To serve as a beacon of purity, sometimes you must do so from the shadows, using whatever weapons, whatever means necessary to do what must be done. For as long as the heretics perish, all can be justified in the God Emperor's name. Under the guise of a mastercrafted shroud field, you infiltrate enemy ranks to take out key targets. Your training as a pious cutthroat gives you no qualms in using backstabbery to bring the enemy down. They'd do the same to you if they had the chance. With a devastating blow, your presence is made known with an invigorating revelation, toughening yourself up for the ensuing panic and melee to follow. The thrill of seeing heretics fall by your hand sends you into a trance-like state, taking an inebriated poise as you maneuver between bodies. Enemies that dare to face you dance with death as you unleash a flurry of attacks, punctuated with the roar of gunfire. With every critical blow you land, your resilience strengthens as your faith endures against overwhelming odds. With every strike, Invocations of Death rapidly restores your shroud field, allowing you to quickly move from one victim to another. You are a bullet of the Emperor, sent to destroy the enemy with both gun and blade. Your faith is your hammer, smiting heretics with a burning hatred. Your contempt is your shield, shrugging off brutal attacks with ease. Your wrath is swift, bringing redemption to all who stand against the God Emperor. And should the heretics falter and flee like the cowards they truly are, they shan't do so for long, as blades of faith guided by the hand of the God Emperor himself find their mark from afar. While an assassin would much prefer their presence remain unknown, the brutal punishment you inflict on those who cross you and the sustained assaults you bring down upon the heretic spreads a creeping dread among them that you are coming, bringing a swift certainty that death and destruction will soon follow. That you are here, a scourge that leaves hallways and hat blocks littered with bodies. That you are inevitable, and there is no stopping your inexorable judgment. That was the talent selection narrative. I've tried multiple iterations of the build and have concluded that the damage output often isn't a problem. However, what this build needs is survivability to constantly go about making plays and taking risks. Before we talk about strategy, tactics and your role, let's talk about the weapons and curios of choice. For this build, we are going to want the Katachan Combat Blade 3 and the Zarona Quick Draw Revolver. I have tried the new Revolver and Combat Blade with this build as well, and my conclusion is that the new Combat Blade is definitely serviceable, but I prefer the Mark III because it has a better single target attack pattern with its push attack and the first heavy. Both blades will work fine, however. On the other hand, the Agrippina Fanfire Revolver doesn't do as good as a job as the Zarona for its intended purpose in this build. You will get much more use from the range of the Zarona especially. The Combat Blade fits this build perfectly because its high attack speed and crit chance means we'll be activating Invocations of Death a lot to get our short field back quickly. Its innate 25% backstab damage on its first heavy makes assassinating targets with a backstab very effective as well. For blessings, you'll want Lacerate to give you the ability to apply bleed stacks as and when you want to. I know there is some debate out there about the point of Lacerate since you will have Scourge anyway, But from my testing, Lacerate offers a lot of consistency to this build than without. Consistent bleed means consistently being able to activate Scourge on any target, which means more consistent critical hits to get short field back faster. Lacerate also allows you to compound the bleed damage you deal faster than without. If you hit an enemy twice with 2 critical hits, with a tier 4 Lacerate and Scourge, you would apply 12 stacks of bleed to them. Most regular enemies will die from 12 stacks of bleed taking them down, not to mention the attack damage as well. Having a consistent way to apply bleed means you can dance around enemies, slashing them as you move around without having to commit to the kill, death by 1,000 cuts style. This aspect is very important for how we are going to play our role in this build. The next blessing you'll want is Uncanny Strike. The rending buff from Uncanny Strike makes taking on crushers and maulers directly a lot easier, but also increases the effective damage from your bleed stacks as well, making your attacks that much more lethal. As for perks, I've gone for Flak and Maniac damage. These are the two most threatening armor types that you'll cut through since they comprise the majority of elites. For your ranged weapon, the Zarona Quick Draw Revolver is the one to go for. Built with hand cannon and surgical, you have a reliable tool for dealing with crushers and maulers from afar. As the primary purpose of the revolver will be for eliminating specials and heavily armored enemies, we will want to take Maniac and Carapace damage. This gives you a pocket sniper for taking out important targets in an instant, even if they are in the middle of a horde. Finally, for Curios, I have tried out a bunch of different combinations and have found that a mix of stamina, health and toughness works very well to support this build in various ways. For perks, I've gone all in combat ability regeneration to reduce the cooldown of short field as much as I can. This works perfectly with Invocation of Death since it always reduces the ability cooldown by 1.5 seconds no matter the current cooldown. I've also gone all in with Gunner Resistance because these are the only enemies that can be really problematic in your combat engagements, especially if they are far away and pelting you with gunfire while you are busy with enemies in front of you. Lastly, I've chosen to take 2 sprint efficiency perks and 1 stamina regeneration perk to keep my stamina pool high while I'm on the move. This build does a lot of moving around and you will want to keep your stamina high as a means to fall back on the defensive if you have to, but also as a tool for dealing heavy damage with your push attacks when needed. With the build in place and our arsenal ready, now we can take a look at how a proper assassin operates at the highest level of difficulty, as well as some tactics and tricks you can employ. Unlike other builds, an assassin's potential is heavily dependent on the player. This playstyle requires a great deal more risk-taking to accomplish things other classes simply cannot do. To that end, I think it would help if I set forth a simple list of tactics available to all assassins to employ in their missions. These tactics are actions you can use to help your team out, no matter the difficulty level, and actually be a useful asset instead of a knife-wielding deadweight or worse, a speedrunning idiot with no sense of objective or purpose. Tactic number 1. Intercept. By using your incredible mobility and invisibility, you can scout ahead of your team to identify combat opportunities. One of the most common things you can do is tie down shooters and gunner patrols in melee before they are aware of your team's presence. This nullifies them as a threat and makes it easy for your team to advance more aggressively while providing you with supporting fire. Be wary though, if there are many ranged enemies spread out in an open area or if you find yourself in too tight of a space, gunners and shooters from a different area might start firing into you from a different angle. Make sure to always have an escape route or some cover you can hide behind. Tactic number 2. Pincer. After intercepting a group of enemies and taking them out, you usually have 2 options. The first is to hold your position and wait for the rest of your team to catch up before you move ahead again. This ensures you won't be too far away from fire support if you need it. The second is to engage enemies on the way back to your team. If you run past a bunch of enemies in order to engage gunners and shooters firing at your team, you can double back and sandwich the remaining enemies caught in between. This tactic opens up a lot of backstabbing potential and is especially useful if you run past armored patrols to take down gunners, snipers and bombers suppressing your team. Just make sure the patrols have its attention directed somewhere else before you engage. Tactic number 3. Anti-Suppression. If you play on the higher levels of difficulty, especially on Auric and beyond, you'll know that gunners and reapers can show up in great numbers, sometimes in the dozens. If they have already entrenched themselves in a particular location, they can lay heavy suppressing fire that makes it very hard for your ranged teammates to shoot back. This is made even harder when there are frontline enemies in the way and long-range specials like snipers and bombers in the back. In these situations, you can push behind enemy lines to take down the suppressing enemies quickly, giving your team some breathing room to shoot back. Unlike the intercept tactic, anti-suppression is more reactive than proactive. Just remember to manage the risk involved when pushing deep behind enemy lines on your own. Tactic number 4. Rear guard. Believe it or not, you don't always have to be in the front lines or deep behind enemy lines as an assassin. Because of your powerful mobility and escape tools, you can also take a more relaxed position and keep your ranged allies safe from backstabbing enemies as you trail behind them. This gives them the assurance that they can fire into the front line without being disrupted since they have you covering their back. The most annoying enemies to look out for are of course disabler specials like trappers and poxhounds spawning behind you, but small groups of straggler shooters can also be a nuisance as they pepper your team from behind. Now, just because you're in the back doesn't mean you can't contribute. This brings us to our next tactic. Tactic number 5, Phantom Strike. There is a move you can do with your Shroud Field that allows you to deal a tremendous burst of damage. While you already know that Shroud Field does a lot of damage on its own, what you might not know is that there is a very short activation delay timer built into the ability. Presumably, this is in place so you don't accidentally waste your Shroud Field mid-swing on something unimportant like a Poxwalker. However, the damage buff from Shroud Field still applies during the activation delay, giving you the benefits of Shroud Field without breaking your invisibility. This is most apparent on chain weapons where if you time it just right, you can get 2 special attacks off that are buffed up by Shroud Field. Where the Phantom Strike is most useful is with the Revolver. Because we have the Hand Cannon Blessing on the Revolver, and Shroud Field gives our next attack a guaranteed crit, we have 2 heavy hitting shots that can break through armor with ease. This basically means, with a nicely rolled Revolver, we can guarantee a 2-shot on a Crusher from a distance. This tactic gives you more ways to utilize your Shroud Field instead of just a positioning and escape tool. Finally, our last tactic is tactic number 6, Flickering. This is a defensive tactic that greatly bolsters your survivability while in combat. Because of how this build is designed, you can get your Shroud Field back very quickly, sometimes in under 5 seconds. With such an incredible uptime on Shroud Field, you can use it while fighting regular enemies to keep Invigorating Revelation active, giving you a constant toughness regeneration and damage reduction for 5 seconds. What's more, because Shroud Field guarantees a crit, you'll also activate Enduring Faith for a massive toughness damage reduction buff on top of the damage reduction from Invigorating Revelation. This makes you much more durable than you are while you are in combat and scoring crits. This tactic is called Flickering because from the enemy's point of view, it looks like you are flickering around the battlefield, disappearing and reappearing from sight as you slash and stab. These are the 6 tactics you can employ in your gameplay to make you a much more effective assassin. Just to be clear, these aren't hard and fast actions to follow, but something to keep in mind and utilize when the situation calls for it. This build requires a good deal of practice and becomes more valuable the higher in difficulty you go as the situations where you can make plays increases. I'm over 20 Damnation Plus games with this build and I'm still learning to be better. Still learning from mistakes and misplays. If anything, this build will teach you about situational awareness and will cultivate your game sense in terms of positioning and seizing opportunities. That is all for this build video. This is an extremely fun build to play and is easily one of my top 5 most favorite builds. I hope you found the video useful and enjoyed it. Thank you all for watching and I will see you in the next one. Varlets.